In 1957, a 13-year-old boy took a streetcar to the El Rey Theater in San Francisco to see the new rock and roll pioneers, Bill Hayley and the Comets. He fell in love with the playing of the lead guitarist, Frannie Beecher, on the number Goofin' Around. On the ride back home, he wondered if someday he could own a guitar and learn to play like that. Yes, he got the guitar and he learned to play well. And he has recently recorded an album which he dedicated to Frannie Beecher, his boyhood idol and now friend, and it has earned a spot in the Canadian chapter of the Rockabilly Hall of Fame. I'm Marilyn Priel with The Better Part. Stay tuned while this very versatile guitarist, Andrew Norblin, tells us more about that story and about his fascinating family and background.
Welcome to The Better Part, a program by and for seniors and devoted to exploring the many facets of those better years of our lives. The name of our program was inspired by a quotation from Robert Browning. "Grow old along with me, the best is yet to be, the last of life for which the first was made." Now, sit back and enjoy a program made especially to provide seniors with useful information, plus some lighter moments to brighten your day.
I'd like to introduce to you the very versatile guitarist, Andrew Norblin. Welcome, Andrew. Thank you for coming today.
Well, thank you, Marilyn. It's a pleasure to be here.
Before we start with the story about the little boy and his guitar, I wish very much you would tell us about your fascinating family and background.
Well, my father, Stefan Norblin, was a world-renowned portrait painter pre-World War II, and he painted much of the royalty throughout Europe and the Middle East. He was descended from 4 generations of court painters to the kings of France, and they all migrated to Poland, ended up marrying Polish women and having Polish sons. So although my name is of French background, I'm actually all Polish. And my mother, who he was married to, was Lena Jelichowska, was a very famous motion picture actress in Poland, again, also pre-World War II.
I know you were born in India, and there's kind of a journey that your parents took to get you there. Would you tell us about that?
Sure. After Germany invaded Poland in 1939, my parents left the country immediately, and my father had already been commissioned to paint portraits of the royal family in Iraq. And so making their way across Europe, they spent a certain amount of time, I'm not sure exactly how much, in Iraq, at which time my father painted portraits of the royal family. In fact, I have a very nice picture I think you're going to show of my father standing next to the Prince Regent of Iraq and the life-size portrait that he did of him. After that commission, there were a number of Maharajas from India who saw my father's work and invited my father and mother to come to India, which was a 6.5-year stay in which my father painted much of the, many of the palaces in India.
What kinds of paintings did he, were they on the walls or?
He painted murals of Indian mythology primarily throughout the walls of many palaces in India.
And then when you were 2.5, your family moved to San Francisco, and your father worked there, but you actually returned to India something like 50 years later, wasn't it, in 1994 for the first time?
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, actually, I was born, my father and mother were there for a 6.5-year stay from approximately 1940 to 1946. And I was born in the last 2.5 years of that stay. And we were living in Jodhpur, and my father was working on completing the murals in the Umaid Balwan Palace, which is located in Jodhpur, India. And my parents decided to come to the United States when I was 2.5 years old. And what you were talking about in 1994, a photojournalist from Britain and a man from Berlin, Germany, who both of them were collaborating on a book on the history of the palaces in India, They contacted me, found out the son of Stefan Norblin was living in the San Francisco Bay Area, and asked me for any information, any pictures that I might have to help them in the research on their book. And in mentioning that, I just said to them, you know, someday I would like to go back to India and see my father's work. And one of the men said, well, let me find out what I can do about that. And the next thing I knew, I had an invitation from the Maharaja of Jodhpur to be his guest, because they were having a 50th anniversary of the palace, which was completed actually in 1944, which was the year that I was born. And so the 50-year anniversary was in 1994, and I was invited back to be one of the guests of honor. So it was a pretty interesting trip.
How long were you here?
2.5 weeks. And we spent the last week and a half approximately in Jodhpur as the guest of the Maharaj in his palace, which is actually partly now a Sheraton hotel also. But the thrill was to be able to see my father's works in a lot of the different rooms of the palace.
One of the nice things that your parents, while your father was working there in India, is now they were in Jodhpur.
In Jodhpur.
And they were given a very nice home to live in while they were there.
Yes, and I got a chance to see that home.
When
because I did not know when I actually went to India, because I was actually born in Bombay, and I did not know that that the home that my mother and father actually lived in, which was provided by the Maharaja of Jodhpur at that time, was actually only a few miles from the palace. So it was a big thrill when the Maharaja's secretary said, well, we're going to have you give up, rent a car for you, and you can go down and see this house, which is now occupied by the commanding officer of the Northern Indian Army. And for security reasons, I wasn't able to see it. I was in the garden, but one of the captains who was on the security force for the general happened to notice that I had a photograph album with me, and I had my photographs I brought along of my mother and my father and myself as a child in front of this house. He said, may I borrow that booklet? I said, sure. And he goes inside the house. Next thing I know, General Khanna and his wife would like you to come in for tea. And so I was actually able to go back inside the house and see where I had lived as an infant. So it was really full circle.
Now, life went, once you moved to San Francisco, your father bought a home and built a studio in the home. And then what kinds of work did he do there? There were no royalty, no kings and queens or palaces.
But he actually did some very famous portraits. There's a life-size portrait of General Douglas MacArthur, which is hanging in the Pentagon even today. And the Giannini family, which Giannini was the founder of the Bank of America, he did a beautiful portrait of Giannini, which I imagine the family has in their home today. And that was featured on the cover of Time magazine in 1951.
So life went well for a while, and then when you were 8, you had a very sad tragedy.
Yes, I lost my father, unfortunately.
And did you have any family in the U.S.? How did you and your mother
No, it was my father and my mother and myself. Almost all family had been killed in the war in Poland.
So how did you and your mother get along?
It was just the two of us, and of course my mother loved movies, so on the weekends we always went to a movie. I didn't realize what a struggle it was for her. She was working as a manicurist in the beauty salon, and that's quite a change from having been the most famous motion picture actress in Poland before World War II.
Well, it's nice that you were so close, the two of you. And now let's move on to the famous ride on the streetcar.
Well, as any preteen, I began listening to the radio and became interested in pop music, probably about the time I was 12 or so in junior high school. And I always liked Bill Hayley and the Comets with Rock Around the Clock and Shake, Rattle, and Roll. And I remember when I finally got a chance to go to the movies to see them on the big screen. And I just fell in love with with what I was hearing, but especially, I didn't realize it until later, how much I enjoyed listening to the lead guitar playing. And that's when I thought, boy, I would sure love to be able to do that.
When did you get your first guitar?
Well, when I was 13 years old. I had saved up my allowance, and my mother gave me a few extra dollars for my birthday, and I went down to downtown San Francisco and picked out this guitar I'd been swooning over in the window for months for $30.
Did you begin lessons right away?
Well, we were very poor. We didn't have any money for lessons, so I was able to just learn whatever I could, pick up what I could.
From the radio and records?
Radio, playing along also with learning things from friends of mine who played a little bit of guitar, learning a few chords here and there.
Mm-hmm. Well, about that time you had another tragedy, didn't you?
When I was 14, I lost my mother, so I was orphaned at age 14.
Just before high school?
Actually, I was just a couple of weeks before starting Lincoln High School in San Francisco.
So you went to live with a couple, and you started high school, and how was high school for you?
High school was great. One of the things that happened was that before the guardianship was taken over by these friends of my mother, I had to naturally go through a whole process of guardianship and had to appear before a judge in San Francisco. And one of the things that he wanted to do after checking over my academic program and all my courses, said for moral and character building, I think besides your academic program and your PE and everything else, I'd like you to enroll in the ROTC program. And San Francisco High School has had a pretty extensive ROTC program at that time. And so I did, and there was a sergeant, an Army sergeant, Master Sergeant Edward Hofferber, who became quite a mentor to me and almost like a second father in some ways. And I really excelled in that program, and very proud to say that by the time I was a high senior, I had been promoted to the highest possible rank in the city as a full colonel, commanding officer, brigade commander, all 7 high schools in San Francisco.
Well, that's something to be very proud of. When did you first begin earning money as a musician, a guitarist? Oh,
my best recollection would be that I was right out of high school. I went on a little trip with a little family circus up through Washington, Oregon, and Washington, and that was a big thrill to get out there and play for 2.5 weeks or 3 weeks. And I think I may have played a few small little dances when I was in my senior year in high school, but I don't remember.
And then you actually worked your way through college as a musician?
Yeah, I didn't have any aspirations of becoming a professional musician at that time. It's just something that I enjoyed doing. So I was getting an economics degree out of San Francisco State University, and I can remember vividly carrying 16, 17 units in my senior year and working 6 nights a week at a pizza parlor in Jack London Square in Oakland with a little band.
I bet that was kind of fun.
It was also very tiring because I was getting home at 2 a.m. and then having to be up at 7 a.m. for 8 o'clock classes.
Now, I know that you taught you got your teaching credential, and you taught for around 20 years, but all during that time you were accepting engagements, musical engagements. Weren't you almost a full-time musician as well?
I really was a full-time musician. I was working, I've done everything from teaching elementary school up junior high school, and I even taught college economics at some of the community colleges. But as far as music goes, there was a society band leader organization in San Francisco that I worked for 24 years, and we did everything from every society party up and down the peninsula to even being flown back east for the America Cup races in Newport, Rhode Island. Okay. And that was a 24-year
and
stay with him.
Then you decided to, about 15 years ago, you decided to abandon all the teaching and just do music.
15 years ago or so, I thought I'd like to just do music. I'd had I'd had enough of the teaching, and I thought I'd like to just play full-time. And I left that organization in San Francisco because I wanted to have a little more independence as far as working for whoever I wanted to, and which is basically what I've been doing up until now.
And what inspired you to do the CD and to dedicate it to Frannie Beecher?
Well, for years people had asked me, have you got a tape or a CD or anything? And I always had to say no. And finally in 2000 I got a chance to finally meet Frannie Beecher, and as a result of meeting him we became the best of friends. And he asked me, he said, have you got something that I can hear that you've done? And I went through my collection of tapes and found just a few tunes I could find that were representative of some of the things I did. And with that I said, it's time for me to make some sort of a statement musically, and I decided I'm going to make a CD. And during that process of making it, I decided that I thought that instead of just doing a musical CD, I wanted to do something that was kind of inspirational and kind of traced back my background, showed a little bit of everything that I could do well on the instrument, and I wanted to include my beginnings in the music, into music, and so I took that same tune that you mentioned, "Goofing Around," that Frannie Beecher had done with the Comets, a guitar instrumental. I did my own version of it, and I put it as the last number in the album, as the finale, and then dedicated the whole album to Frannie. And he was thrilled. Totally caught off guard, had no idea that was coming.
And he was one who actually got it into the Rockabilly Hall of Fame.
Between himself and one of the webpage managers for Bill Hayley out of San Antonio, Texas. Yes.
Was it a lot of work? Because I know you produced the album, and you did the cover and the cover pages, all the line notes, you did the arrangements. I
did everything, and it was a 2-year process in the making because there's all the preparation. I was very lucky to be able to work with some of the finest musicians that are also my friends, which is why I called the album Andrew Norblin and Friends. I wanted everybody to be featured a little bit throughout it. And I wrote all the music for it. I did all the arrangements. I did all the producing. I knew when I went into that studio that I had to have total control of everything that was going to happen. And for an hour's worth of music, it was 106 hours in that studio. So it was a lot of work.
Well, would you play something from the album?
Sure, be glad to.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I really enjoyed that.
Well, thank you.
It wasn't rock and roll.
No, it wasn't.
Very different. I have heard it said that one of the reasons you play so many different kinds of guitar and are so versatile is because just by listening to all the different guitarists, you picked up different styles so that you can actually do a lot of different. I noticed on your CD that actually you're playing Malagueña, which is classical. So
did that on an acoustic guitar, actually.
It's a beautiful guitar, and I know that there is a really nice story behind that. So would you tell us that?
Yeah, actually, this is a Gibson ES350T, and this is a model that I have always wanted, and very hard to find because they were discontinued by the Gibson company in 1962. Frannie Beecher of the Comets still plays his, and he has one also. And I don't have this one because he has one. It was one that I'd always wanted anyway. But one day last year, I ran into a collector who had a number of guitars, and I found out that he had a 350. And I was kind of wondering what kind of condition it was in, and he told me that it was a 1992 model. I should mention that the Gibson company will reissue certain models every few years out of their custom shop, and this was one of those. And so I got together with this fellow because he was interested in selling it, but he said, I don't want to sell this guitar unless it's to exactly the right kind of person. This is not a guitar to be sold to a rock and roller or some kid, learning to play, little rock and roll licks and things like that. So it's got to be the right person. And so anyway, when I told him the whole story about the CD and my connection with Frannie Beecher of the Comets, and he informed me that he remembered all those movies and remembered all the playing, he almost got tears in his eyes. And he said, he says, I think this guitar has found the right person. And he gave it to me at a great price. And when I opened the case and looked at it, I mean, it was in brand new condition. I don't think he had it out of the case more than twice in 11 years. And he wrote me out a very nice receipt, and on the bottom of the receipt, in parentheses, he put, this guitar has found a good home.
Well, that was so many nice stories.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned in the liner notes on your CD paperwork that goes inside the CD that by playing Goofing Around, this last song on your album where you dedicate it to Frannie Beecher, it was not only paying tribute to him, but there was also another purpose in playing that last song.
Well, if I remember the wording on the last part of my dedication, I said to my friend Frannie Beecher, I dedicate this album to you and I hope you enjoy it. And then I said, for myself, I will always remember the dreams of that 13-year-old boy watching you in the movies back in 1957 as you played your signature instrumental Goofing Around. And it's only fitting that I include and make the finale of this album my version of that very same tune, if only to show, even 47 years later, that dreams really can come true.
Well, you have some beautiful stories, and thank you for sharing with them.
You're welcome.
Sharing them with us. And would you play that famous Goofing Around now for us?
I'd be glad to.
And we'll get as much in as we can and while we roll our credits.
Okay,
so
sounds good to me.
Thank you.